Hello and welcome to DragonCon 2020. My name is Stefan Price. I'm a professional prop and special effects artist. My panel today is prop making for fun and profit. I hope everyone is staying healthy and safe out there. I know that we're all sad that we can't meet in person, but hopefully next year we'll be able to get together. This will give you a little bit of a taste of what it's like to be at DragonCon, and we get to share some information and still come together as a virtual community until we can all gather in person again. I'm a professional props and special effects artist, and I'm going to talk today about the different tools and materials and processes of building props. I'm going to talk about the different kind of methods that are out there, research materials. I'm also going to talk about being a professional prop builder, whether it's your full-time job working as a prop or scenic artist in the film and themed attractions industry, or whether you're doing it as a side hustle and just building props, taking commissions, selling online, things like that, whatever fits into your lifestyle and to your level of interest. So who I am and what I do is I've been working for 23 years in the film, themed attractions, and entertainment industry. I started out working as an apprentice at a prop and special effects fabrication shop. And my job was to clean the floors, help out with the projects, and I got to go on a lot of different big projects and learn from some really seasoned, experienced guys. And it gave me a really great start into the industry. At the same time, I was going to school, was starting to go to college for film, but then I sort of found that working in the film industry already, I really was more interested in fabrication. So I switched degrees and I went to the University of Central Florida and got a degree in mechanical engineering. And I dual majored in theater because with the theater department, they always needed somebody to build props and sets. And I got to exercise a lot of the skill sets that I had developed. And I got to keep building stuff. From there, I graduated and then I went on to work freelance the entire time, working in the film and entertainment industry, working on whatever productions and jobs that I could. I enlisted right out of college into the Army National Guard as a machinist, so I got to use my skills and develop some further ones in that capacity. But all the while I was working in the film industry, working in the themed entertainment industry, building stuff, whether for myself or working freelance for other shops. From there, I started my own company, Roundtable Productions, LLC, a props and special effects fabrication company. We build stuff for film, live events, themed attractions. A lot of our work these days is building stuff for the theme parks, primarily Disney and Universal being our main clients. We've built a lot of stuff for everything from Harry Potter to Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. We've got elements and pieces of ours that are in every major park here in Orlando, in California, in Tokyo, in China. We've got a fun list of projects that we've worked on. I love working on big projects for the theme parks. I also love working on projects for other clients. A lot of live entertainment, trade show booths, and then film, television, music videos, commercials, TV shows. It's a little bit of everything. I like to solve problems with creative, technical kind of solutions, learning about all these different things. I like storytelling through practical design and practical effects work. Additionally, about 4 years ago, I co-founded a space called Maker's Hollow, and it is a creative co-working maker space located in Winter Garden, Florida. The goal is to provide access to tools, space, materials, and community for artists and makers to come together, work on projects, learn from each other, and be supported as independent professional makers and artists. If you want to find out more, you can check it out on Maker's Hollow or our YouTube page, Maker's Hollow, by the same name. And you can see some of the videos that I'm putting out and more content that we're creating. Okay, so let's get into this. So normally this panel would be live and we'd be able to interact with one another and ask questions and answer questions. So with this being a pre-recorded thing, today I'm going to talk about a lot of general topic ideas and information. I'm also going to get into some targeted information as well. And I'll answer some of the most common questions that I get about being a professional prop and scenic artist. If you have any further questions, you can feel free to reach out to me, follow me on Instagram, send me some questions. I love answering. I've got a lot of experience in a lot of different kinds of aspects to being a professional prop and scenic artist. Some of my stuff is really great for some people that want to learn, and some of it worked really well for me, and you got to kind of find your own way. But feel free to also check out my Maker's Hollow YouTube page where I'm going to be having conversations with other artists and makers to talk about their journey and what we've done and what we found works for us so we can hopefully share some information with you. Okay, so first let's talk about references, education, resources to go to. The easiest and most obvious one these days is the internet. There is a wealth of information on the internet. There are lots of different fantastic artists and makers that are on there that are sharing the information. My classic go to is books and magazines. I've got a huge library of books. I've got just bookshelves of reference books, all kinds of different things from prop building, mold making, welding, carpentry, miniature building, faux finishes and scenic painting, lots of behind the scenes books into movies and television shows, ones that have a lot of special effects. One of my all time favorite is the Cinefex magazines. They really go deep dive into the behind the scenes of how things were made and the processes that went into it and the creative problem solving. That's really great for focusing on film. If you're just into building cosplay or building props, there are so many books out there on carpentry, on plastics, on molding and casting that I have just everyday kind of need for. I'll reference something and find it really helpful to have a physical book on my shelf with this information to come back and reference to. Some of my favorite books are got Costumes and Chemistry is a really great book because it really breaks down the different kinds of materials and how to use them, how to work with them. And there's a lot of great books out there. Websites, some of my favorites are I'm a member of the RPF, the Replica Prop Forum. It's a really great community of people who are sharing information, sharing ideas. There's a lot of great information out there on the web now. The Stan Winston School is an amazing resource. It is a paid subscription, but you can select a la carte the different classes you want to take, or you can just pay a regular subscription and get access to everything. There are some of the world's best artists and prop builders as a part of that community. Are sharing the information freely. I wish I had that as a resource when I was getting started. It's amazing. The information there is just deep dive into everything you'd ever want to know about prop building, model making, animatronics, miniatures. It's just a great, great resource. Another great website is This to That. If you're ever trying to wonder, like, okay, I want to glue this plastic to this foam, what's going to glue? What's the best glue to use? There's a really great website on there, This to That. You type in the different materials you want to use, and it gives you some guidelines. Always take everything as a guideline. There are some hard and fast rules to working with materials, but a lot of times it's figuring it out, it's trying it out, it's researching, it's experimentation to try to see what works for you in your application. A lot of these things are out there as guides, as resources to expand your knowledge. Don't always take everything as canon information. It's a lot of it's guidelines, but definitely follow all the safety information when it comes to working with materials. With YouTube being a resource these days, there's so many amazing websites. Channels like Tested. There are so many different artists and makers and cosplayers that have channels, tutorials that they put up online. Instructables.com is a great website. A lot of these are out there, other prop makers and artists, hobbyists that are all trying to figure out stuff. And so they're putting out their process. It's really helpful to use when you're trying to figure out how to solve a problem, when you're trying to build a prop, make something, build a cosplay. It's a guideline for working with materials that is out there. There's so many different ebooks these days as well. A lot of these cosplayers and makers are creating ebooks so that they can share their information, give you step-by-step guidelines that help you as a resource for building your projects. The internet has democratized access to a lot of this information and access to these resources and materials. So that's a great place to start, but it can definitely be overwhelming with so many of them. That's why I really like places like the RPF, because it's a community where people can share information and you can kind of find out what other people like to use. And it creates a kind of a trusted network of individuals that are all working with the same kind of target goals in mind. As your education goes, always keep learning. I never stop researching things. I never stop learning. I'm always trying to find out more information. Constantly, my life is education and expanding my knowledge and reconfirming the things that I know how to do. Learning new tricks. There's always new materials. People come up with a clever way of working with something that sometimes you hadn't thought of before. So I'm always learning. I'm always studying. I'm always researching. As far as resources for where to go to school if you want to become a professional prop builder, there are a lot of different kind of courses to go with that. I started out working in film, so I was going to school for a degree in film. There were people that were prop builders that I've worked with that went to school for art. And under the art category, there is all kinds of illustration and sculpting, graphic art. All of those skills would be useful, and any or all of them would be useful in becoming a professional prop builder. There's no real one category out there that anybody necessarily looks for when it comes to being a professional prop builder, because there's so many different ways to come at it. So anything like, I've got a degree in mechanical engineering, I've got a degree in theater. Those are both areas that are useful. I combined them together in a way that made sense for my career choices. Anything that gets you working in an artistic and creative problem solving way is going to be something on your resume that's going to help you get a job if you want to become a professional prop builder. There are a few different kind of courses out there to teach you about prop building, horror makeup effects, prosthetic makeup effects. There are official classes. There are online things you can do. Anything that you can do to gain information and learn knowledge is going to help you with your resume. If you want to work for some of the bigger companies, they're definitely going to require an advanced degree, like a college degree. And a lot of those are all looking for a variety of different backgrounds. They're looking for either art or design or engineering, industrial design, something that's going to help them know that you have a classically trained background in some of these areas of focus. Those might be required with bigger companies, but when it comes to working in the film industry or it comes to working for a prop or scenic shop, a lot of them just want to know, do you have the experience? And a degree helps you with that, but it's not necessarily required. So having a good portfolio, having a built up resume, that's the sort of thing that's going to help you get a job. And that's going to be more important in the long run than whether or not you have a degree. But degrees always kind of help in certain circumstances. When you're first getting started out, the best thing you want to do is start with your concept of design and start with a simple pencil and paper. It doesn't matter whether you use plain paper, lined paper, ruled paper, graph paper, mechanical pencil, number 2 pencil. The important thing is that you start with your design and start putting your concept down on paper in a way that's really easy to augment. Number 2 pencil with an eraser. If you make a mistake, if you want to change something, you can always erase it. You can draw over it. It's the quickest, cheapest, easiest way to start. The best thing you can do is just start with a pencil and paper. Then you can graduate on to more complicated ways of designing it, 3D modeling it, whatever you want to do. When you want to start getting into software, there's a lot of different kinds of choices to go with. You can use something like a Photoshop. You can use something like Adobe Illustrator. I use a suite of Adobe products, for everything from Illustrator to Photoshop, for helping me design a lot of my stuff. There's other programs out there. Corel Draw is one that's really great. If you don't want to pay for a subscription or pay for a software, Inkscape is a free vector design software. It's really good to know any kind of vector drawing software if you want to become a professional prop builder. Even if you're doing it as a side hobby, it's a really powerful tool to have at your access. And so knowing how to use vector design softwares is really going to help you create better designs, faster designs, and more detailed. It's going to help you when you want to get into advanced fabrication, digital fabrication methods. For 3D software, there's a lot of different options out there. Everything from free to paid, from parametric design to more sculpting design. It really kind of depends on what you're comfortable with and the kinds of props that you want to design. So there's everything from SketchUp and Fusion 360 and Rhino 3D, other kinds of parametric modeling, engineering-based softwares. And then there are things like ZBrush, which are sculpting, everything from Mudbox, Tinkercad, and there's just a world of different options out there. The best thing I can say is find the way that you want to design and the kinds of things you want to design and start playing around with that software. For me, I'm using Fusion 360. I find it to be a really powerful software. They provide it free to novices and students who are just kind of starting out, and then you can pay for a subscription to get maybe all the bells and whistles later. But a lot of it is all there for you to begin with, and you really don't need to start out with a paid subscription until you kind of really need those extra features. Unless you're doing this professionally, then they're going to ask you to pay for a subscription. There's a lot of great programs out there like Tinkercad and SketchUp, which you can get access to for free, that I see some people do some really powerful things with. It really comes down to problem solving, understanding how to visualize things in the computer in 3D, understanding about adding and subtracting and removing things. It's digital sculpting, which then leads me on to just saying that sometimes the best way is to design a thing in the real world in a practical way. And for that, I recommend good old practical cardboard. Cardboard is an incredibly versatile material. You can use foam core, you could use poster board, you could use the corrugated cardboard like comes in all our Amazon packages these days. The main thing is that you're thinking about how to take planar surfaces and create three-dimensional objects. And that's the same thing that you're going to be dealing with if you're going to be creating objects in 3D in the computer. The difference is when you're looking at them in the computer, you can only see them on a two-dimensional plane of your computer screen. If you build a model out of cardboard or poster board, you're going to be able to actually take that physical model and turn it around and hold it in your hand and actually understand how the different surfaces are going to interact with each other. What does it look like? What does it feel like? You're going to be able to show it to someone. If a picture's worth 1,000 words, just imagine how much more valuable a physical model in the real world is. So whether you're building a large-scale miniature, a prop, a set piece, whatever it is you're building, a lot of times the best way to get started is with just a simple bit of cardboard or poster board. And those are tools that you can get access to very easily because the materials are very easy to manipulate. All you need is something like a really sharp razor blade, a metal straight edge, and you're off to the races. Maybe some tape and a little bit of glue for piecing the pieces together. It's really easy to work with, and you're going to find that it helps you to start to develop the process of understanding how to create objects in 3D and how to think about adding and subtracting on materials. And you can build a lot with cardboard or poster board. A lot of the most complex builds are often better off built out of something cheaper and easier first before you then start to build it out of the final material. There's a really great quote from an art teacher out there that said, the more expensive the paper, the harder it is to draw that first line. So if you're working with some real expensive materials, you can be really intimidated to get started on them because of the cost and the challenge of working with those materials. So starting with something as cheap as cardboard and paper, it takes a lot of the intimidation factor out of making something, and it can really help you get an understanding of your object in a way that's even greater than 3D modeling it. 3D modeling can be a huge asset. Start with an early kind of technology, paper and cardboard. The next class of materials that's really great to work with is clay. Clays are like cardboard in that they're relatively inexpensive, but they're really easy to manipulate in complex ways with very inexpensive tools. So there's a lot of different options when it comes to clay. Water-based clays, oil-based clays. One of the most famous water-based clays is what's known as wed clay, W-E-D, for Walter Elias Disney. It was a formulation of water-based clay that was developed for the Imagineers because they were using so much of it. And it's a really common material to find out there, and it's really great to work with. It's relatively inexpensive compared to other materials. You can also work with oil-based clays. They're also really great because they don't dry out like water-based clays do. And the same thing, they can be worked with very easily with very inexpensive materials. You don't need to buy a lot of expensive sculpting tools. You can make a lot of tools yourself. There are a lot of different options out there to buy, but a lot of times just some dowel rod and some steel wire and you can fabricate most of the tools you need all on your own. And they're really easy to work with. They help you learn more about adding and subtracting, and it's a really crucial skill to have to be able to sculpt and work with clays if you're going to become a professional prop and model builder. The usefulness is just so varied from concepts to sculpting your final designs. It's a really great material to work with, knowing how to work with different kinds of clays. When it comes to oil-based clay, I definitely want to highly recommend that you look for sulfur-free clays. These are clays that are going to list the detail as being sulfur-free. The important thing about that is sulfur-free clays are going to be better for you in the long term because you'll be able to mold them with silicone rubbers. There are lots of problems when you use oil-based clays that aren't sulfur-free. There's going to be cure inhibitions that are going to be problematic later on, and you'll really appreciate that you just didn't even buy anything that has sulfur in it. If you always buy oil-based clays that are sulfur-free, you know you're always going to be safe when it comes to your molding and casting later on. The next group of materials that is incredibly valuable and useful for all prop and model builders, and a lot of you probably know, is foams. There are so many different types of foams to choose from, but all of them have their different uses and applications. There are popular ones like EPS foam, which are the expanded polystyrene, the little white bead foams. Those are really great because they're very lightweight, they're very cheap to acquire, they're easy to work with, they're a little messy, and they can be limiting as far as how much detail you can get out of them. But as far as their functionality, they're lightweight, they're really easy to sculpt, and it doesn't take real expensive tools to work with. There are also insulation foams that are out there, which are the denser kind of cellular foam kind. These don't have the little white beads. These are more of a uniform texture, uniform density. Commonly, they're seen in pink and blue insulation that you can buy at the hardware stores. There are some other varieties out there. Foamular is one of the most popular brands. These are really great because, again, they're lightweight and strong, but they have a uniform density, which makes them great for sculpting, great for shaping, whether you're using them for concept models and prototypes, or you can be using them for your final props and actually use them as your costume and prop items. The other group of foam materials that are out there that are really popular right now are the EVA foams, your ethylene vinyl acetate. Now, these foams are commonly found in floor mats. A lot of people tend to buy them from the hardware store or Harbor Freights. You can get a package of them. They come in a pre-measured square, but you can chop them up. You can use them for a lot of different materials. There are companies out there that will sell you sheet forms or rolls or even formed shapes of EVA foam. There are even EVA foam clays that are out there now that you can use. So there's a lot of different options for this material. This is one of the most popular options for costume and cosplay. And if you're doing commissions and you're building cosplay, this is definitely a great material because it is affordable, it's lightweight, it's flexible, it's moldable. You can really work with it with a lot of different tools. The important thing is to make sure when you're cutting it to always use a sharp knife. For any of the foams, your knives are going to get dulled very quickly. So you want to have a ready supply of sharp razor blades and sharp knives, or have a sharpening stone so you can keep sharpening your blades, because as you start to cut through, it will dull a blade very quickly, all the foams, and then it will start to tear and you're not going to get as clean cuts. There's a lot of really cool things you can do with EVA foam. The most common ones you see are the floor mats, where they've got the texture, they're smooth on one side. You can see here I've got some samples that I've made where I actually was trying out different materials of seal them. And you can see here I was even playing around with my laser cutter and putting some details on. You can do things like, you can see the little googly eyes here, and I've made some rivets by just painting over and making them look like rivets as a really cheap way to kind of create some detail. So you don't need a laser cutter. A lot of really great ways to manipulate this are razor blades and heat guns, sanding the edges using a rotary tool. So there's a lot of different options. You can, like I said, you can cut and glue and shape these so you can make all different kinds of parts for weapons and armor. You can sand them and you can get them coated with different materials to try to get really good surface finishes. To learn more about that, I highly recommend that you check out some of the different makers and costume builders that are online. There's some really great ebooks on this subject as well. A lot of it is going to come from just experimentation and seeing what works for you. The important thing to know about all of these foams is when you're working with them, be very conscious of the dust. So when you're sanding and carving the foams, you want to make sure you wear some kind of a dust mask, or work definitely in a well-ventilated area. It's the kind of stuff that's going to cling to everything. It's going to get all over your surfaces. You really don't want to be breathing it in. And if you're going to be cutting them with hot knives or with hot wire cutters, they're going to put off a gas that is incredibly toxic, and you're going to want to wear a respirator and work in a well-ventilated area. Do not hot wire cut this stuff in your kitchen or your living room. Make sure you do it in a garage or an outdoor space or in a workshop. You can sand and carve them inside. They're not going to be putting off the gas. They're going to just be very messy. But be very conscious of the dust and the particulate matter in the air. You really don't want to breathe this stuff in. It's going to cause long-term effects, and you want to be safe. The next big category of materials that are incredibly valuable to know how to use and work with is the molding and casting materials. The options here are varied. There are so many different materials to choose from. There are different companies to buy from. The molding kind of options are everything from silicone rubbers, urethane rubbers, to latex, to making molds out of plaster, making molds out of fiberglass and epoxies. Whether you're doing a flexible mold or a rigid mold, every time you approach a project, you need to understand, what is the material that I'm making a mold of? What is the material I'm going to cast out of that mold? What is the long-term use of this object? How many of them am I going to make? These are all going to affect your material decisions. You always want to approach everything as like a material science question. What am I going to do? What is going to interact well with one another? If I'm making a mold of clay, am I going to make a flexible mold or a rigid mold? If it's a rigid object, you're probably going to have to make a flexible mold unless You think about very seriously how to break up the parts of your mold if you're going to make a rigid mold. And a lot of the decisions for making a mold out of a different type of material is going to depend largely on what you plan to cast out of it. So are you going to cast out a flexible material? Are you going to cast out a rigid material? So knowing what you're going to do is always going to affect what you're going to choose as far as the material goes. There are so many different options. There's so many different materials to choose from. There's not always one way to approach the solution to the problem either, especially with the kind of developments in material science that are out there right now. The next category you're going to want to know about is your casting materials, and that is just as ranged as your molding materials. You've got resins, you've got plasters, you've got fiberglass and epoxies, which still fall into the resin category, but have a different quality than urethane resins. There are different kinds of urethane and soft foams, rubber foams, casting out rubber parts. You could even get into metal casting, but there are so many different options to choose from depending on what it is your final application is going to be. You need to understand what it is you're making. Are you making a prop that's going to be for carrying around as a cosplay at a convention all day? Or are you going to be building something that's going to be going into a theme park and it's going to be outdoors, interacting with the weather, interacting with guests? It needs to be durable. It needs to be fire retardant. It needs to be structurally engineered. There are different kinds of material choices for all of these different options. A lot of the cosplayers these days, they work with resin, urethane resins primarily, and with foams. These are really common items. They're pretty safe to work with. You want to make sure that you wear a respirator, you work in well-ventilated areas, you wear gloves, protect your skin, protect your lungs. If you don't take care of yourself with these materials, you're going to regret it much later on, and it's just not going to be worth the health effects if you don't take care of yourself. So please use safety equipment. Wear glasses, wear dust masks, wear respirators, wear gloves, work in well-ventilated areas. Do not play around with this stuff in an unsafe way. With all the different kinds of resin materials and casting materials that are out there, there's a lot of different options from a company called Smooth On. They're one of the material companies that I use the most. And you can see here I've got a different variety of materials strung together as samples. They've got their material information on the back, and this way I can have little samples to try out and see, what does this feel like, what does it look like, what is the hardness, what is the flexibility. And I've got all different kinds of samples like this. I have a wall of samples in my shop to show all the different kinds of material properties that they have, and what they look like and what they're called. So that way when I'm picking a project, I can kind of decide and choose what I want to use. Same thing for the silicones. I've got a lot of different examples of different silicone rubbers. A lot of the materials I use are from a company called Smooth On. They have local distributors throughout the United States. You can buy stuff online. There are other companies out there as well, so don't feel limited by just the one. There are a lot of different options that you can buy in craft stores as well. Some of those are pretty good. My favorite to use are the Smooth On products when it comes to a lot of the molding and casting resins. There are a lot of different options for epoxies out there, and you can find a lot of good ones at marine boat suppliers, because the resins that are used for boat building are really great for molding and casting and for creating fiberglass, as well as automotive building shops, automotive repair shops. Everything from as simple as finding some simple materials at places like your local auto store, but then getting into automotive paint supply shops are going to have a more advanced variety of options to choose from. Different types of body fillers, different types of resins, access to different weaves of fiberglass, so you can make a lot of different material choices by finding out what the local resources are in your area and seeing what different kind of companies are available to you locally, as well as buying stuff online. Building props for the theme parks and the themed attractions industry requires that the props that we build have to look good, but they also have to be really durable and really strong. So a category of materials really useful are things that can coat onto foam, coat onto other materials to help provide strength and also provide detail and texture. One of the most popular are epoxy putties. There's a range of different options out there. Smooth On makes some. My absolute favorite is a material called Polygem. And this is a really great material that mixes up A and B. It's kind of like a thick peanut buttery consistency. And as you work with it, it will get harder and harder as it cures chemically, and it will dry into a hard, durable, really solid finish. But what you can do is you can do all different types of textures. You can sculpt in detail. You can create textures like bark, like stone, like metal, like aged wood. There's all different kinds of ways to manipulate it, whether it's sculpting it with traditional tools, working with your hands. I create a lot of texture stamps out of rubber, so I can go in and I can actually work these materials into realistic looking textures. And you can intrinsically color them. You can add pigments and things like that. There are different types of resins that you can use as well for card coating foam. Those are really useful to know how to use, epoxies and urethanes. The ones that I use the most, though, are these sculptable epoxy materials. My other really favorite material are the Epoxy Sculpt. Epoxy Sculpt is a really great brand. Again, it's a two-part material. You mix together the A and B. You knead the putty together until it's thoroughly blended, and then you've got a working time as it's curing to mix it together and get it into your final shape. Now that will vary depending on the material that you're using. Epoxy Sculpt, you've got about an hour or so. They have another one called Epoxy Clay, which dries harder and has a smoother consistency, and that you have about an hour and a half. With your polygems, depending on the temperature and the mix, you can have anywhere from 4 to 8 hours. So this one has a really long work time, which is really great for building stuff for the theme parks because we're usually working with very large surface area, and so you really want some time to manipulate that material. The important thing is that you understand how to properly mix these materials and then what you can do with them, how to work them, because when you start out, they're going to be very soft and peanut butter like, but then as they cure over time, they will start to firm up and become more putty like, then more clay like, and then eventually they will become very rigid to work with until they get to their final hardness. So there's different kinds of techniques and different tools that you can use for manipulating these materials. And if you're going to become a proper scenic artist in the theme attractions industry, these are a material that are pretty standard to know how to use. So I highly recommend playing around with them. You can order them in smaller kits, and Epoxy Sculpt and Epoxy Clay and Polygem, which can also be ordered in small kits the same size as well, are really great materials to use, and they're really great for prop and costume building as well, because you can manipulate them and sculpt them just like clay, but then they're hardening on their own into a final object that is very durable. It's paintable, sandable, cuttable, whatever you want to do. Another great option to use if you want to work with clays is to work with things like the Sculpey type clays, the bake type of clays, where you can sculpt it and manipulate it endlessly in its soft clay form. And then you can take that and put it in an oven, cure it by heating it, and then it'll end up a hard object. Those are really terrific for doing maquettes and sculptures, even building prop and costume items. The great thing about them is that they will remain putty-like until you bake them, and then you can sculpt and sand and build onto them with more clay and then fire them again without damaging the final piece. Those have their real great uses. I really like the epoxy clays for prop building because the usefulness of applying something onto a surface, like on a foam, means that it's going to cure hard and I don't have to bake it, because obviously you can't put a piece of foam in the oven. It will melt. It will become a toxic puddle of sludge. So definitely knowing how to work with these different types of materials is really good if you're becoming a prop and special effects scenic artist. The important thing to all of this is that you're constantly learning, you're constantly expanding your knowledge base, you're constantly experimenting with different ways of making different things. So the next category is digital fabrication tools. This is one of my favorite sections of tools to play with. It's really popular right now, and that is your CNC machines, your laser cutters, your 3D printers. So first, there are CNC machines, computer numerical control. This is kind of a generic term that applies to a lot of different kinds of tools. CNC routers, CNC mills, CNC plasma cutter. Technically, even laser cutters and 3D printers are CNC machines. But typically when someone says a CNC machine, mostly that's a shorthand for talking about a CNC router. And basically what that is that there is a router attached to a series of motors that can shift around in X, Y, and Z typically. Sometimes there'll be other rotary axis or multi-axis machines, but the most common out there are 3-axis machines. And these are available in a wide range of different costs. Knowing how to use a CNC machine is becoming sort of as ubiquitous as a table saw in most modern prop shops these days. And a lot of at-home hobbyist makers are having access to them because the price of these has come down, the popularity of them has gone up. So there are more and more options out there. I highly recommend that you at least get familiar with this if you want to become a professional prop builder. It's an invaluable tool to know how to use. You don't necessarily have to know how to use one or have access to one directly yourself. There are all kinds of different services out there that can cut the parts for you. You can farm it out. There are other shops, and there are going to be shops that you work at that will have this equipment. They will use it in all kinds of different ways to help make the parts and materials that they're trying to accomplish. So knowing what this tool is, knowing how to use it is incredibly valuable. Most people these days are pretty familiar with what a CNC router is, and more people are getting access to it. There again, getting access to it at a makerspace is a really great way to get an introduction. The usability of these machines has gone way up, as it used to be that you used to have to know how to program them, which was really complicated. And nowadays, a lot of really user-friendly programs are out there right now. Even things like Fusion 360 can do direct CAM communication with CNC machines, where you can design your 3D model and output the code that will run the machine, and you can directly control your CNC machines without having to have a knowledge of how to program them, which is something that you used to know how to do when CNC machines were just kind of coming out into the market. There's so many different options out there. Definitely research into this if you want to become a professional prop builder. Knowing how to design stuff for CNC machines is going to be incredibly valuable. You can typically do it on things like vector design software like the Adobe Illustrator, CorelDRAW, or you can get into more complicated stuff like your 3D modeling, Fusion 360 software. And sometimes you need to know how to design in 3D, but a lot of times just a two-dimensional sketch is enough to get the part made on a CNC machine. So you really don't have to know advanced 3D modeling to get into CNC cutting. And there's so many different options out there. There are routers, there are water jet cutters, there are laser cutters, there are plasma cutters, there are milling machines. One of the most popular categories of CNC machines are laser cutters and etchers. This is a tool that I love to work with. It's my favorite tool. I have a CNC machine and I've got multiple 3D printers, but I use my laser cutter more than anything else as a prop builder and a model maker. I love my laser cutter. Laser cutters are great in the same way that CNC machines are great, in that a CNC router and a laser cutter can cut a multitude of different materials. And laser cutters have a really fine precision that are really great for model building and prop building. I find that the laser cutter is an incredibly valuable tool to have in the arsenal if you can get access to one. You can cut parts, you can cut jigs, you can cut stencils, you can cut so many different materials that it's a really great, powerful, versatile tool. So knowing how to use one and how to incorporate it into your workflow is going to be something that you're really going to elevate your work if you can get access to a laser cutter, whether it's buying one, whether it's joining a makerspace, borrowing some access to one from a friend. A lot of bigger model shops and prop shops have them, so you don't necessarily need to buy them if you're going to be working in a shop. You can get access to one, and a lot of companies will let you have some time after hours to kind of learn, because they want to see their employees build up their skill set and improve themselves. The final category, 3D printers, is huge. It's obviously the most popular growing trend right now is to use a 3D printer for prop and model building. There are a lot of different options out there. There's everything from FDM printers and SLA printers to metal printers, there's food printers, there's all kinds of different options out there. A lot of 3D printers work with a very limited range of materials, so they have a very specific function. Your FDM printers, which are the most common ones, the fused deposition modeling, that's where you have a spool of filament and it's forcing it into a nozzle that's melting it, heating it, and then it's extruding it out, building up your object layer by layer. The other most common one right now is the SLA printers, and that's either a laser cured resin or a vat of resin with a digital projector or an LED screen of some kind that's curing layer by layer. All of the 3D printing is thinking about how to create objects by additive manufacturing. Your CNC routers, your laser cutters, those are what are called subtractive manufacturing. 3D printing is additive manufacturing, and it's gluing layer by layer together, but you're creating a 3D model in the computer first. So if you want to utilize a 3D printer, know that you're going to have to start with a 3D model. There are options out there like Thingiverse and TurboSquid and different kinds of software that are available to get access to pre-existing 3D models, but most things are going to start with you creating a 3D model. So if you're going to get into 3D printing, know that you're probably going to have to learn how to 3D model and how to use a 3D slicing software to take that 3D model, slice it into the layers in the computer so that a 3D printer can actually create it. So 3D printing is not a magic wand. It does not instantly spit out finished objects. You're going to have layer lines, you're going to have glitches, you're going to have support material that you're going to have to clean off. So know that if you use a 3D printer, it is an incredibly powerful tool, but you know that it will only be part of the process. If you're going to be building stuff, I highly recommend that you consider thinking about what it is that you're making and can you make that object in other ways, and use 3D printing as an asset. 3D printing has a really great feature. The complexity is free. With 3D printing, if I wanted to create a 1" by 1" by 1" cube, and that cube had no detail whatsoever, it would take a specific amount of time for it to build up those layers. But if I have a 1" cube that has incredible amount of detail and sculptural intricacy to the surface, and it's the same height, it's going to create the same amount of time to make that object. So it doesn't matter when you're using a 3D printer, whether it's simple or complex, it's going to take the same amount of time. So use the 3D printer for those complex objects. Use it for the complicated things, because the complexity is free when it comes to 3D printers. The simple shapes, use a simple tool. If you're making a cube, don't 3D print it. Get a block of wood, cut it on your table saw, cut it on a saw, and make an object in a fraction of the time that it would take you to 3D print them. Sculpt it out of clay, sculpt it out of foam. Use the 3D printer for what it's best at. If it's the only tool that you have at your workspace, then that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's an incredibly powerful tool. But I just find that with 3D printers, with the multitude of them that I've owned over the years, they take a lot of work to get your object to a finished thing, because you have to start with a really good 3D model. You 3D print it out, you've got to clean it up. And sometimes I can get there faster and better with other materials. So know that 3D printing is great, but it's not a magic wand, and it should be used as part of your toolkit as much as you possibly can. As far as other tools go, there's the traditional tools of hammers, screwdrivers, saws. Everything that is useful as a woodworking or metalworking tool is something that is part of the arsenal of a prop builder. One of the most valuable, though, is the rotary tool. The rotary tool is probably the most versatile tool that a prop builder can have in his toolkit. It can sand, it can cut, it can drill, it can router. You can use it for a multitude of different uses. The most popular brand out there is Dremel, but there are other brands as well. I highly recommend that if you want to get started, you start with a rotary tool. It's a really great tool to have. As far as the other tools that go, everything is usable. Power sanders, drills, screw guns, table saws, chop saws, hand saws, routers. Any kind of woodworking tool or metalworking tool is going to be useful in some way, but it's really going to depend on the kind of props that you want to build. I don't recommend that you go out and buy every tool under the sun. Start out with a good core set of tools that are versatile. Start out with a rotary tool, maybe a palm sander, maybe some other kind of basic tools. A jigsaw is a really great one to have. But then sort of buy the tools that you need as you need them. Collect them as the jobs come up that require them. There are so many different routes to go. There are scroll saws, there are table saws, there are routers, and so many different options to choose from that I really don't recommend buying everything. In my shop, I've got just about every tool that you can possibly imagine using for woodworking or metalworking, but I didn't go out and buy them all at once. I accumulated them through a long career of working with stuff, and then I kept upgrading them. I kept buying nicer tools. I elevated them into buying things like I've got a welder, and I've got bigger saws. I've got customized specialty tools as I needed them, as they're required by the job. If I went out and bought all this stuff, I would have bankrupted myself right out the gate. So start out with a basic set of tools. Definitely have a good set of hand tools. Buy some quality tools, and then buy some cheaper ones for the stuff that you're not sure if you're going to use it that much, until you're really sure that you know that you need it in your arsenal. But be comfortable working with these tools, because if you're going to be a prop builder, whether it's as a hobby or as a full-time profession, knowing that you can manipulate materials in multiple different ways is going to be incredibly valuable, and having those tools at your fingertips. If you don't want to go out and buy them, also, consider joining a maker space or being part of a local woodworking club, because a lot of people have these tools sitting around and they're happy to share them. They're happy to help them, or you can get access to them in different ways, like joining a maker space and paying a low monthly membership to have access to all these resources and tools without having to go buy them yourself. It's a really great way to get started, and it's going to save you a lot of money in the long run. So now you've gained all this knowledge and experience in working with materials. You like to play around with different types of tools. You've got some skill set in manipulating different types of materials into their final shape. And you've learned how to sand about a million different ways, because 95% of all prop building is sanding. That's just part of the tedium of being a prop builder. But now, how do you get that job? How do you take that to the next level? That has just as varied a road to get there as the different types of materials that are available to you. There are so many different options, especially these days. If you want to become a professional prop and scenic artist, there are different types of companies that specialize in this that you can try to find work with. There are scenic companies that build stuff for themed attractions. There are sign builders. There are prop and special effects companies that work in the film and entertainment industry. There are live stage events, trade show companies. There are theaters across the United States that you can try to get into by going in and saying, hey, I'm here to work, I'm here to learn. But a lot of these places are going to look for a skill set that you at least have as a base knowledge to start with. So definitely keep working on personal projects, keep researching, keep learning and expanding, even as you're working, even as you're working professionally at some place in a specific area of focus. You may want to start learning about a different material. A lot of shops will hire a prop or special effects or scenic artist for one specific thing. They might hire you as a sculptor, and that's all you're going to do. You might hire you as a mold and cast maker, and that's all you're going to do. They might hire you as a finish painter or a model builder. A lot of bigger shops will hire someone with a very specific area of focus, so you don't need to necessarily be a generalist. If you want to continue to work on different types of projects, then you're going to have to learn how to do a lot of this on your own, and then pick up things from people as you go. The important thing is going to be putting together a portfolio. Start by building up your resume and show me as an employer, when you submit a resume to me, don't show me all the places that you've worked. As you're building up your resume, as you're working through college, a lot of people have to get jobs, and it might be working in retail, it might be working in service industry. It really doesn't matter what it is that you have to do to pay the bills. There's nothing wrong with that. But when it comes to applying for a job as an artist, build your resume about being an artist. Show me all the times that you built a prop for your own personal use. Show me all the times that you worked on some school production, if that's all you've got to get started out. Show me where you helped out somebody with their short film, or that you built some prop or costume item just for the fun of it, if that's all you have on your resume. As you start to build up your resume and have more professional credits to your name, keep adding those, keep expanding those, and put those items that are going to focus on the job that you're trying to get at the top of your resume. The best thing I can tell you is write the resume for the job that you want. If I'm going to hire you as a model maker, don't show me all the things that you did that are digital sculpting projects. Show me where you worked with molding and casting materials, where you worked with different kind of materials to make a product, and leave off the stuff that is irrelevant to that job. So don't show me where you were working in a retail job, or even if it's something like you showing me that, well, you showed up on time and you had a good report from your manager. Those aren't bad things. Those aren't bad areas to talk about in an interview when you're trying to get a job. But when it comes to a resume, write the resume for the job you want. Only include those things that are going to be helpful to someone to understand who you are as an artist, and how they can understand that you're going to fit into the job that they're trying to fill, that you're going to be able to make the things that they want to make. And then build up your portfolio. Put those things in your portfolio. Try to take good photographs. When I first started, cameras were not attached to every cell phone. They were not as high resolution. So all I had were some simple point and shoot cameras. I didn't take good photographs of everything that I did. So a lot of really great projects are kind of lost to the blurry Polaroids and point and click cameras that I had lying around, and I wasn't really great about documenting my stuff. Fortunately, that didn't seem to limit me, and I've got some really great photos of things I've done now. The problem that I run into now are a lot of the projects I do are non-disclosure, so stuff I do for Disney and Universal and other similar clients. I've got to sign a non-disclosure agreement that says that I'm not allowed to publish these photographs. So I don't spend a lot of time updating my portfolio online with a lot of these things, because I can't really show some of my best work, especially my most recent stuff. But make sure that as you go, you document what you do, because that portfolio to show potential employers and potential clients is going to be really important. Working with clients, working with whether that client is your employer or whether that is the final client, meaning Disney, Universal, or some cosplayer that is commissioning you to make a product, That is going to be a big part of your job as a prop builder. As a professional prop builder, you're going to be wearing many hats. You're going to be part designer, part craftsman and artisan, and part business owner. You're going to have to learn how to communicate with people. You have to know how to communicate an idea to someone and receive that information. And in a lot of times, you're going to have to learn how to work in a group as a collaborative effort to make a final product. If you're going to be an independent prop builder and you're just going to take commissions and sell stuff online, you can get away with just working as a lone artist. A lot of times, if you want to work professionally, whether it's in the film industry or the theming and scenic industry, you're going to be working with teams of people. So know how to communicate with other artists, know how to communicate with clients, know how to communicate your ideas and receive those ideas from them. That's going to be a big part of what you do. Now, when it comes to working in the mega industry of film, theme parks, and entertainment, there are some locales that are going to be better for other places. And if you live way out in rural area, there's not going to be as many opportunities to work in professional props and scenic as there will be living in these bigger metropolises. So your locales like Los Angeles, Orlando, New York, Las Vegas, these are the major entertainment hubs. There are all kinds of exceptions. There are places out there that have lots of tourism, which means that there's all kinds of different attractions. Escape games and museums all require props and set pieces to be built. So there's not just one way to get in. It's not, well, got to move to Hollywood. With the film industry being so decentralized, there are major hubs for filmmaking and entertainment these days, like Atlanta, Georgia, like New Orleans. There are lots of different places in New Mexico, and then in Vancouver, Toronto, Canada. There are places where filmmaking is going on that they need people that can build things. So you don't necessarily have to move to Hollywood or to Orlando if you want to work in theme parks and attractions, or if you want to work in the film industry. There are different examples of places, and there's so many theme parks that are stretched across the country and across the world that all need props and sets built. Now, I live in Orlando in Central Florida, so I build a lot of my stuff for Disney and Universal, but I also build for Disney and Universal in California, for Tokyo, for China. A lot of the stuff that I build goes across the country, goes to other countries. It does help that I am in a central hub of the kind of entertainment themed attractions and film industry. But there are companies that are stretched across the country that aren't centrally located. So if you want to get into this, you don't necessarily need to move. But if you really want to get ahead in the industry, it's definitely something to consider with any kind of profession. You want to think about, where do you want to live? What do you want to achieve with your job? As far as finding work out there, like I said, theater is a really great way to get started. There are always theaters that are in need of people that want to build and want to learn. A lot of it will be volunteer or low paid, so they will let a lot of novices and inexperienced people come in, and you can learn a tremendous amount by building for theater, because they're always kind of playing around with different ideas, and it's a great place to get started. I really enjoyed my time being in theater in college because they always needed someone to build the props and sets. So I spent a lot of my time in the shop building everything that they needed, and it was a great way to kind of expand my skill set and build on my knowledge base. The other great way to get started is look for local shops that build things for window displays, for signage. There's always a lot of different companies out there that build signage that are working with laser cutters, CNC machines. Vinyl cutters is another great tool that we didn't talk about. These companies are building really unique things quite often, sometimes three-dimensional objects. So there's going to be some sculpting, there's going to be some fabrication involved. They're working with plastics, they're working with wood, they're working with metal. Signage companies are a really great place to get started if you're looking to cut your teeth into becoming a professional prop and model builder. There are so many different companies out there that build booths for trade shows. Trade show booths is a big industry. And live entertainment, a lot of these companies build really unique things, and they never build anything for a theme park or for a movie, but they build some of the most incredible stuff. And it's the same kind of skill set, it's the same kind of tools that they're using, and you get to build a lot of really neat things. And these companies are spread throughout. You can sometimes find one that's within close proximity, and you don't have to live in a major entertainment hub. Now, with selling stuff as an independent prop builder and building cosplay and selling and doing commissions online, these days you can live anywhere. You can get access to these materials through the internet. You can get access to clients through the internet. You can promote yourself through YouTube, through websites. So the options are a lot greater these days for becoming a professional prop and scenic artist than they were when I first got started. I definitely encourage people to express that side of themselves, to kind of try out some ideas, see if that's what they like to do. When it comes to selling online, you can make your own stuff, you can sell it online. There's so many different options these days, from creating 3D models and putting them up for free on some place like Thingiverse, or selling them in the digital marketplace. You can also build physical props and be selling them on places like Etsy and other types of eBay and websites. You could build your own website so easily these days with website builders like Square and Wix and different kinds of quick and easy website builders. You can sell your stuff on your own pages. The important thing to understand is that copyright violations are a violation from creation. So there is no such thing as, well, I only sold one, or I only made 10 copies of these. If you make a copy of somebody else's work, you are in copyright violation. Now, some big companies will let you kind of get away with it, will let you squeak by. Lucasfilm has been famous for letting fans build their own costumes. People build everything from stormtrooper armor to lightsabers to R2D2s. And the company, for the most part, is pretty chill with it, and they encourage it because they know that that supports a strong community of creative people. And they know that it encourages their fans to participate in the storytelling. Know that if you start to sell these products online, these companies 100% retain their copyright on these designs, and they can come and tell you to stop selling it and take it down. If they hit you with what's known as a C&D, a cease and desist, that means you cease and desist. It doesn't mean if you've made 10 and you've already sold 4 of them, you can sell the last 6. That's not what it means. Copyright violation is from creation. So if somebody else owns a copyright on a design or a concept, and you make a copy of it, whether it's for your own use or to sell to someone else, you have violated copyright. So be really careful about who you copy and what you copy. It does not mean that if somebody else made a copy of a lightsaber that officially appeared in the movie and you make a copy of his lightsaber, that person can come after you. It means that the copyright holder, which is Lucasfilm, owns the copyright, and they have the right to license this out to other people. And there's a lot of companies and artists out there that have spent a lot of time and energy getting the rights to those licenses so they can make official copies. And they also have rights to come and say cease and desist. So if you ever get a cease and desist, please be respectful and just cease and desist. Do not try to argue with someone who owns a copyright. As I said, there are a lot of companies, video game companies are famous for letting their fans build stuff, and they will tolerate a certain amount of commerce around their designs because they know that they're never going to make a full suit of armor of a Halo Chief armor necessarily, but there are companies out there that have spent a lot of money to get a license to a Halo Chief helmet or to a particular weapon from the game, and they don't want people competing with them after they spend all this time and money. So do your research when you're going to be making cosplay and props from popular culture items. Don't think that you're going to be able to sell 1,000,000 of these, because a lot of the bigger companies, they will kind of tolerate a certain small community of people trading and selling things. But without a license, you're not going to be able to go mainstream. So just be respectful of people's copyright. I highly encourage people to build their fandom as a personal expression. Build your fandom as a great way to learn and try out projects and ideas. But when it comes to selling your objects, selling things online, creating kits, be very wary about what you copy, because know that the copyright holders rightly hold power over their designs, and they should have the right to control who and what is done with their objects. It's a lot of fun to make a living being a prop and scenic artist. There are definitely days where it will feel like a job. Every job in the world is work, and being a prop and scenic artist is no different. There will be tediousness of sanding a thing and working with materials, but the end result is always so rewarding. As a creative person, I love seeing the finished products. I love seeing an idea become a reality. So it's something that I'm really passionate about, and I really love building stuff and telling stories through physical objects. It's my favorite thing to do. It's a very silly job. I have a very silly job, and I know that, and I have that perspective. So I try to keep that in mind as I'm doing the things and I get tired and weary. As a professional prop and scenic artist, I've worked 24-hour shifts time and time again. I have worked under stressful conditions. We have worked with tight deadlines. We've worked with limited materials. I've worked with being worried that I'm not going to make that deadline. And it's definitely a job like any other job, in that you just got to get up and do it some days, even when you don't want to. But it's the only thing that I know how to do, is to tell stories through making. And that's the part that I really love. So when I get to see people interact with the stuff that I make, when I see them react to it and get a thrill of excitement, understand the story that we're trying to tell, that's the rewarding stuff when I get to see the final product. It's the most fun thing that I know how to do. So I highly recommend to give it a try if it's something that you're passionate about. It definitely will take passion, but being an artist of any kind takes passion and drive, and definitely play around and have fun with it. I'm really glad that I got to sit here and share some of this information with you. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to me. You can reach out to me here at my Instagrams. Well, thanks a lot for joining me in this panel. I hope you learned something about prop building and about how to become a professional prop and scenic artist. Thanks for joining me here in my cave of wonders. I got to have some fun making a little physical representation rather than using some of the digital things, kind of with a last minute idea. That's a common thread with a lot of artists. We get ideas and we still have to meet the deadline. So I kind of threw this together. Please definitely like, follow, and subscribe to my Instagram, to my YouTube page, StefanFX79 on Instagram, Makers Hollow on Instagram, on YouTube. I'll be putting out some more video content, showing you some more about the different things that I've made, some of the fun kind of ways that I play around with storytelling. And I hope that you have a really great time watching the rest of the panels, and we get to see each other again for DragonCon 2021. See you later.